Thank you, Volmar. Welcome, everyone, to this session of the RDA Life Science Data Infrastructures Interest Group. My name's Jeff Christensen. I'm from Australian Biocommons, and Volmar Åkerström from Elixir, Sweden. We're the two of the co-chairs of this group. And yeah, thanks for coming along. Next slide, Volmar. So if you're new to the RDA, so welcome. Just a quick recap of this is a RDA interest group. They're meant to serve as an ongoing platform for communication and discussion amongst individuals, both inside and outside RDA. And really these remain in operation as long as they're active. So this particular interest group, obviously we're concerned with life science data infrastructures. We were formed in 2022. And it's really, we were formed to act as this bridge between the operators of life science data infrastructures and different groups in RDA, but also for us around the world to liaise with each other as operators of these infrastructures. So we've held sessions at 6 of the last 7 plenaries. We'll have a bit of a chat around that later. And we do aspire to have meaningful representation from all around the world. And our current co-chairs are from Europe, Australia, US, and South Africa. Next slide, please. So why we formed, this is probably no news to anyone here, but this is an extract from our charter. The life sciences, of course, are becoming increasingly data intensive, largely driven by omics methodologies, but also other methodologies such as imaging. So there's really a need to have sustainable and interoperable data management and storage that allow the use and reuse of these highly complex data. So it's not, as I said, not just an omics sort of focused explosion in data. There's a lot of other different types of data as well. So phenotyping, imaging, biosample management, all of these can be considered part of life science data. And we really need to be thinking around how we make all these parts interoperate together. Next slide, please. The other, I guess, aspect of how broad data is in life science is that, life science is actually a very broad and diverse sector. So it covers everything from health to food production, industry, environmental science. And again, increasingly, we really want to think about how we enable all these different parts of life science to interact with each other and the data to come together. As I said, so really this group was formed to serve as a bridge between all parts of life science and think about data integration and across all of life science. Next slide, please. So today the aim is really to really have a bit of a retrospective of what we've been doing so far, but really invite perspectives and the others here to shape the group's future activities and really think about how we can, what can we do with other RDA groups? What can we do with other initiatives around the world? So we've got a bit of time to set the scene. And then we'll mostly aim for discussion around how we can strengthen collaboration. So be a little bit interactive. There's some Mentimeter polls, and we really encourage everyone to join in the conversation. Next slide, please. So if you haven't, I think there's please go to the collaborative notes, the chat. It's in the chat. The direct link to those session notes, and please feel free to write notes in the document and also add your name as an attendee. Thank you. Okay, next slide. So again, the interest group, I mentioned our current chairs are from across Australia, Europe, Africa, and the US. So myself and Volmar are here today. If you're interested in, I guess, where we thought we were going when we started off, we did a data stream podcast, and so we were reflecting on what we thought our aims were. So I won't dwell on that, but please, if you're interested, have a look at that or have a listen to that podcast. Next slide, please. So that's, I guess, a very broad introduction to the group and our aims, but we'd really like people to people who are here. Let us know where you're from and what your interests are in this topic. So if everyone can scan the Mentimeter, myself included, we can start to fill out the poll. Okay, so I think Volmar's now going to drive this. So
Yes, sorry, I forgot to unmute. There we go. So
okay.
we should be able to get some questions going. And the first one is basically an icebreaker here to see where are people from. I think you already answered that question in the check-in for the collaborative notes, but please also share it here and then we can get an overview. So some people from the US and Australia, of course, and Europe, of course. Maryland, nice. And let us see how many responses we have. So we have 6 responses out of 8 people who have joined the Mentimeter. I give it one more long pause, and then we'll move on to the next question, which is maybe a little bit more closely tied to the group's topic and for us to get to know you as an audience. So your role in the research data infrastructure landscape, you could be anything between a user, researcher, going to infrastructure and hoping that we can support you, or you could be someone actually running or coordinating it, or maybe funding it. So it would be very interesting to us to know a little bit more about your role in this.
Great to see we have a user in the mix.
That's good. And I mean, user, I guess, is a broad spectrum. So if you feel that you are comfortable speaking up, please by all means do so, or just put a comment in the chat to let us know if you can qualify a little bit what your role is. I see that there's maybe a more heavy lean towards people at infrastructure supporting users of it. But I also noticed that Patty just, how do I pronounce your name? Patty just unmuted her camera. Maybe you want to speak up and give a perspective.
Oh, yeah, right. I said my name, Patty, and I didn't unmute myself. Yeah, so I am now the Chief Technology and Data Officer of my startup. I'm doing all the implementation, and I'm also a scientist and a principal investigator who has been funded to do research, COVID research and other research, and I downloaded data from different repositories, and I have used data infrastructure. So I'm new to this, to be honest, this is the first thing I should say. I'm new to this group. I'm just interested in, I mean, I'm familiar with, I've tried some of the, for example, the Terra infrastructure to run analysis on omics at NIH. And I've used at Pharma, I've used 7bridges, which also runs omics, pipelines and all kinds of different pipelines. And I know about Elixir efforts. I think they're very interesting. We talked with some of the Elixir people, although I haven't used their data or their systems. And I also develop tools for mostly, we're focused on data quality at the moment, but also at data analysis. So I'm just very interested in seeing, understanding a little bit more what you're doing, where it's going, and where the technology is, how the technology is being built and improved today in 2026, now that, AI is coming in. And so I'm just curious about that. And I know you're doing this for Research Data Alliance, so I'm curious also about the link for that. Like if you're building new, hi Lars, if you're building new infrastructure specific for RDA.
So I can answer to your last question there directly. We're not building new infrastructure specifically for the RDA. This is a platform where we connect and get to discuss some of the cross-cutting issues that we have across several of these data infrastructures in different continents. And then at the same time also has an opportunity to reach other infrastructures that we haven't been able to connect to just yet, and maybe also some potential collaborators on technologies that would be relevant across, regardless of which domain you're into. So there's some really useful synergies that we can create. And I think as we move along, we're going to have opportunities to discuss that a little bit more in depth. And I would really like to encourage all of you who are participating to speak up during the discussions and maybe tell us a little bit about your interest and where you would like this interest group to move in the future, even if you're a newcomer or new member. So I'm going to move to the next question, which is basically your expectations on this session. Why did you join? Just a simple word or something on those lines. So we get an idea of what you might want to get out of this when you leave today. And after that, I think we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda. Use of AI, interoperability, data science, knowledge exchange. Yes, I think this fits pretty well with what we have in the slide deck and for the topics in our discussion. Learning, discussions, there's going to be ample opportunity for that as well. And infrastructure funder. I'm not exactly sure what that kind of means. I don't think we have that much representation from funders or that perspective today. So maybe if you are one, then do by all means speak up and give us some feedback on what you think that we should be focusing on to support the research that you're funding or the future research infrastructure that you see a need for. All right. So I'm going to leave this one open, I think. So if you something comes to mind, then you can still continue to add comments here. But let's move back to the slide deck. And here we're going to move over to the first item on the main agenda, which is setting the scene for the discussions that we're going to have at the end of or intermingled actually compared to the agenda. We thought that it might be useful to actually have the perspectives that we present intermingled with some questions or topics for discussion, and then revisit that for a synthesis at the end. So a slightly different change of the agenda compared to what you saw on the website, but materially it's the same, and I think this is going to be a good approach for it. So we're going to have a few reflections. Unfortunately, as you can see, Nicola Mulder, Alicia Wood Charlson, and Susan Gregory could not join us today, which means that I and Jeff are going to present some reflections that represent their infrastructural perspectives Still, we will be able to bring in these discussions to them at a later stage, and then as we prepare for the session in the fall. And I'm going to start off with a perspective from Africa. So this is a few slides that Nicola Mulder prepared for today's session about the H3A BioNet infrastructure in Africa and the future infrastructure collaboration ILWAZI. So let me see, I think I need the speaker notes in front of myself for this. One moment. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with H3A BioNet since before, but it's a Pan-African bioinformatics network. It connects 28 partners across 17 countries and is over 200 members. So it's a distributed infrastructure network. And it covers infrastructure for both human infrastructure and supporting collaborations, and then also computing. So you can actually do analysis on top of important data sets. There is a wide range of activities that H3 BioNet has supported, and they've been going at it for over a decade. So touching everything from computing to data management, data analysis, and enabling different use cases, specifically genomic medicine, and then also training. And these kind of tie in together. And there are some impressive statistics linked to this. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they are on the slide. So if you're curious and want to learn a little bit more about the history and legacy of this project, by all means, go back and revisit this slide and learn more about it. So it's had quite some impact over the years that it's been active. So the funding for H3A BioNet has ended, but the outputs that were produced during its active phase will be kept in different places. You can see already from the start here an arrow going from the audience and kind of the competency and skills that have been built up as part of this effort going into the African Bioinformatics Institute. And Nicola mentioned that this is somewhat similar to what we have in Europe for Elixir Europe, which connects bioinformatics infrastructure on the European level. So that's something that we need to kind of look into in the future, the changing landscape and putting that on the charter, so to speak, and embedding it to the map of what we cover in this interest group. So I think these resources that were developed over time, they are organized under the different steps here in the data lifecycle. So you have an ontology, for example, that was developed as part of this effort, and that's going to be kept alive in an infrastructure called AfriGenD, a genomics data hub. And then there are some other resources that were also developed, some of those going into AfriGenD, but then also some tools and workflows going into this ILWAZI collaboration. There are some other things that have been produced that are also kind of going to find their way. And unfortunately, I will not be able to expand much about what these resources are. But if you're curious, then we will have ample opportunity to discuss this with Nicola and connect you to her between the sessions. What is maybe the most interesting feat here is that ILWAZI, this open data science platform, is something that's currently being built up, and it's going to be covering a lot of the aspects that the H3A BioNet used to cover. So you should be able to kind of find the catalogs and a lot of the resources accessible under this new platform or umbrella. And one of the key aspects of this infrastructure is to make data resources fair and then also foster kind of the skills that you need to make use of them. I think this is as good of a presentation I can give, given that I'm not affiliated with it. but I think it's a good perspective on, I mean, the landscape will always be changing. And the question that I put here under as kind of following this presentation was, how do we grow and maintain meaningful representation of global life science data infrastructure in this group? So if you have any ideas on this, then please do feel free to speak out. And maybe also we could use the Mentimeter to continue to add some written comments if you don't feel comfortable speaking out. But given that we're so few, I think it would be really nice to have more of a dynamic discussion. So maybe I can call you out, Jeff, here. What have you had some reflections on how we can foster these kind of more meaningful relationships between life science infrastructure? We haven't really been growing that much in the last few years where we've been running these meetings at the RDA plenaries. So maybe we need to do more active outreach, or are we happy with the current situation?
Yeah, well, I guess you're correct. I think when we got this group together, the representation was across US, Europe, Africa, and Australia, and it hasn't changed at all. We haven't really actively gone out to get, if we're thinking about better geographical representation, we have none at the moment from Asia. We have none from Latin America. And, these are things we could choose to do. We haven't done it. So, I mean, I actually think if we do want to do that, we just need to do it. We need to actively do it. And, even going through the representation current a survey of maybe the current RDA members and actually getting, from within the RDA, identifying further individuals would be sensible. But yeah, I think that's what we need to do. I would just reflect, and I'll probably touch on it later, that I do think from the groups we do have now, we have been learning things from each other. And I think others that have come along have also been able to do that. So it's just worth noting.
That's a good point. So maybe we could put some effort into showcasing what value we have received as partners in this throughout the series of meetings we've had, and maybe also between the meetings as we prepare for the next session.
I mean, one thing I've certainly found valuable is, it enables, I mean, we build a relationship with others in the group. And so whether or not we interact in the sessions, it doesn't really matter because we can actually very easily interact outside of the sessions. And there's multiple examples where, we have, been working together on various other aspects. So sometimes a paper, sometimes a little project that aren't really aligned or affiliated with RDA, but these are additional activities that are happening.
Right. Great. So anyone else who would like to speak up on this?
Anu has her hand up.
Oh, right. I can't see that for some reason. Go ahead, Anu.
Yeah, hi. I guess almost everybody here knows me. I just wanted to say if it might be useful to have maybe regular interest group meetings. Maybe there are people who are unable to make it to the plenaries, and if you are planning activities around plenaries, maybe you lose those folks that actually would probably be more positioned to attend regular meetings than plenaries, because there's a financial cost, right, to attending plenaries.
That is a good point. At the same time, I think we have actually reduced the amount of meetings we have to close to zero, and only focus on preparing for the sessions more or less offline. So I think maybe we can kind of try to revitalize the idea of having more regular meetings, but at the same time, I think we need someone to be able to chair the meetings and prepare the agenda for those meetings as well. And so far, it's been difficult for us to, I mean, find a time slot that works for everyone. Or I mean, it's never going to work for everyone. But it turned out that, I mean, we ended up compromising on the end where it wouldn't be comfortable for Europe and Africa. And then Nicola Mulder couldn't attend most of the meetings. And if we would move it around, it would be difficult for another end. So I think that's something we should definitely try to explore and see, I mean, what are the possibilities to actually get it to happen as well
So,
in that
Volmar, may
case.
I suggest? I mean, I attend a couple of other interest group meetings, right? So they essentially have meetings that are not confined, I guess, to just the co-chairs. The meetings are invitations to the whole group. And I wonder if even if a few co-chairs can't make a couple of meetings, it might be, something that could be worked around. I realize that it's hard to coordinate across so many time zones.
Yeah, I think maybe one approach could be to, as we define a topic for the next plenary, and then try to engage more of the group in preparing the next meeting, and then setting up a series of discussions that could help inform and shape the session. That would maybe offload some of the work from the chairs, and at the same time offer opportunities for people to be more directly involved in setting the agenda and working out the contents of the sessions. So I think that's a good idea. Jeff?
I'll, I'll it's an interesting one because I think we did try this in the past. So we used to have, I think, quarterly meetings, and as Volmar said, it was we sort of had one, and it was like 4 a.m. for me, and it was like midnight for the Europeans and the Africans. So, but we sort of struggled along. We did talk about maybe having a rolling one where we would have it at two different times of the day, but I think at those meetings we never actually they were open to everyone in the group, and we never got anyone who wasn't a co-chair turning up to those. And part of that is I think the times were just really unpalatable. But what we haven't done, I think, is actually survey the group for topics for the session. So maybe that's an idea that we should actually, we as the co-chairs have really been, I guess, identifying the topics, but we could actually broaden that out for the whole group. So that's probably a good idea, I think.
Yes, very good. I think maybe we need to move on to the next presentation and the next question, but we will revisit this. So, I mean, I've tried to add some comments now based on our discussion into the Mentimeter to just kind of record them in a sense. But let's move over to the next presentation deck, and that's me again. So this is a presentation or a perspective that comes from myself engaging with another platform for global collaborations and some reflections around what the RDA has meant for Elixir and for me personally in a discussion then with this other global infrastructure. This is the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health. So it's focused on genomics and health related standards and supporting the buildup of infrastructures in that domain. So I prepared a outline for, I mean, where would RDA fit into the ecosystem of an organization like the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health. And since they have a broad spectrum of different standards, it is possible to identify some of these standards that could actually apply a little bit beyond genomics and beyond health. So we have quite a few of them that are very specific. I mean, guidelines on how to do certain types of storage of actual sequencing data from DNA. But then there are or encryption standards and standards for privacy and security that apply a little bit more broadly. And there's also some specifications related to discovery systems, databases, and how they're connected, and then also some policy aspects on security for infrastructure. So there are some things here that are definitely not specific to the GA4GH, and where it would make a lot of sense to highlight the good work that they've done to a cross-disciplinary community. And I think the RDA is a good platform to do that. And then maybe also have some discussions on how these standards could be adopted in other disciplines or adapted to be more easily generalized and connected across domains. And then I gave a brief introduction to the RDA, and I used this graph because that was the only graph from the RDA in a nutshell that had a timeline on it. This shows the growth in membership from the RDA organization. And the first one is just a scale from a year, and you see the rate is 78 new members per month or so. And this has been going on for quite some time. So the graph is more or less has the similar slope since 2013 when it started. And putting this into perspective, we have the RDA's guiding principles that you are familiar with since you have attended the plenary a bit. They were set already at the beginning, and they are more or less the same or similar. And then we had the plenary meeting last year in 2025. So it's an organization with a very long history. The sequencing of activities here, you can see that you have a lot of plenary meetings on the way here. So every 2 years, or sorry, twice every year, you have these meetings, and the 27th plenary meeting is going to be the next one. And putting this into the infrastructure perspective, and I mean the stakeholders that I represented here. So, for example, Elixir Europe and the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health both were represented at the initial plenary where the Research Data Alliance was founded. And already in the first few meetings, Elixir established an interest group to liaise with the RDA and share some of the developments in the life sciences in that context. I joined the RDA quite a lot later in 2019, but it's been also a very useful and I mean, for professional development, useful journey to be part of the RDA, originally representing a generalist perspective across many of the different sciences, and then going more closely into the life sciences. And you can see towards the end, we actually transitioned the bridging force, the Elixir bridging force interest group, to the life science data infrastructures interest group. So going from the Elixir perspective to a broader life sciences data infrastructures perspective. And at the end, towards the end, you can see that the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health, they also formed a strategic partnership with the RDA, just articulating some of the intentions that these kinds of collaborations are important, and also from kind of a coordination perspective. What the RDA does, it hosts this working group and interest groups and create good circumstances for them to operate and bring people together. It also produces a number of recommendations that support data integration and makes or solves problems that people are facing. And I'm going to use the Life Science Data Infrastructures group here as one example of an interest group. So these are focusing on solving problems in a domain or in a group or something on that, or in a topic that may be a little bit more long term. So it's not specifically determined or set in time when it's supposed to end. It can keep going as long as there's interest around it and there's people attending the meetings. Some of the outputs could actually be to form a new working group. That's something that we haven't really been doing, focusing directly on in the life science data infrastructure interest group yet. But as you will see that there has been, one accidental working group or incidental working group may be taking shape based on our work here. Here I pointed to the example from the exploring the FAIR requirements for federated infrastructures in the life sciences and beyond session, because that had a strong representation of GA4GH standards. So we had many examples across all of the infrastructure partners where those standards were prominently represented and being implemented across different infrastructures. And in the sessions, we do identify some outcomes and potential groups for future synergies. And for the GA4GH, I highlighted a number of different groups that are some generic and some are more specific that could be of relevance to the GA4GH community. This session that we had on the 22nd plenary more or less informed and motivated me to bring in this topic for a GA4GH Connect meeting in the future. So, there is this kind of cycle of us bringing in topics from the life sciences into the RDA, but it also goes the other way around. And maybe we could be more proactive or think a little bit on how to optimize this workflow. The working groups in the RDA, they have a lifespan of 12 to 18 months, and what they do is basically produce different outputs or recommendations. These recommendations usually are being, or they always should be, announced so people can review them or learn about them and adopt them. So maybe this is something that we could do a little bit more actively also in the interest group. We have been trying to promote new recommendations within Elixir, but we haven't really actively been trying to do that as part of the interest group. There's other kinds of outputs as well, rather than just the recommendations. And here's an example of the multi-omics standards landscape review, which was an interactive browser that you could look into the different standards they've been collecting. So that was also a very interesting thing that we highlighted within Elixir. And then when new working groups are starting, people are invited to comment and give feedback on the work that they will be doing. So we could have a stake in shaping what the working group will be doing without necessarily committing to being involved. And that's also something we could do specifically with the life sciences perspective. And then also, of course, there are kind of community reviews for all of these, the outputs, the working groups, and other things. So that's one avenue of potential collaborations that I highlighted to the GA4GH community and that I think could be relevant also in this context. And then I took these slides from a different context, why I personally engage with the RDA. So on the one hand, it does provide me with opportunities to find new collaborators and inspiration to the challenges that I'm facing locally. So sometimes you are one of few people who are working on a certain type of problem. And then this is a place where you can find equally specialized people in the research data area. It also has this kind of diverse mix of people from academia, industry, and governments, which is very interesting. So you can hear about problems or perspectives on problems that you might not otherwise have really been able to kind of explore. So that's also really rewarding. And then there's a lot of work that you could look into. So if you're trying to solve a problem, then you could look at the recommendations of the RDA. Some of them might be dated, but still a good starting point. And then there's also a good body of work hidden inside of all of the sessions past of the Research Data Alliance. And most of this is still openly available and recorded. So there's a lot to learn from the body of work in the discussions from the interest groups and whatnots. And Elixir has been reporting from the plenaries with some highlights for the Elixir community. And I think the number here has probably changed now, but there were 19 reports published when I presented this. And these contain some summaries of what the groups have been doing of relevance to the life sciences. So I think the RDA is doing a pretty good job in doing what it said it should do, support the volunteer community, that's us, doing in-kind contributions and finding synergies to work together to solve challenges for the research data community. And then I wanted to segue into this question. So how can we better serve as a bridge between communities and relevant RDA groups and whatnot? How can we make this a more efficient machinery as an interest group? And of course, I also prepared a Mentimeter for this. And maybe I can call you out again, Jeff, as the co-chair and my person to go to when I start focusing on typing.
No, of course. And when you were talking, I was reflecting on, I think something we haven't done a very good job at is actually identifying other working groups that are, relevant for the topics we're thinking about and actually inviting, joint activities because, yes, we all, I mean, all the co-chairs and a lot of the people are all concerned with life science. So a lot of us are building life science data infrastructure. Some of us are using it, but in some sense, life science isn't that special. It's a data infrastructure, and there's a lot of data infrastructures in other disciplines that are grappling with the same challenges. So I think how do we better serve as a bridge between communities is maybe something we should be thinking about, is identifying those communities and actively bringing them together. So not just a sort of passive hoping that, by being part of RDA will happen upon something else, but, something a bit more active.
That's a very good point. So that's something we can do both leading up to the plenaries and maybe more actively having other groups involved in shaping the discussions, but maybe also encourage the members of the life sciences data infrastructures group to navigate what is being done in the RDA and share their experience of using or interacting with the other groups. So I see we also got another point here. So anyone else that would like to voice some reflections based on this? I see Gork H would be happy to collaborate on health data infrastructure interoperability. I am suspecting that that might have been Lars adding it. Or am I wrong?
That was actually myself, Anthony Juni,
Nice.
but also happy, kind collaborator with Lars on that working group, and we're actively working on sending out a survey in which we'll collect some insights into open API data points and standards for supporting data mesh interoperability and other pieces there. And I think this group could serve as a good bridge also for disseminating and analyzing those survey responses. But Lars, please do any other. I'm certain there's lots of points of collaboration that we could support here.
Well, I think you're really bringing up one thing that I think can be good is just this sort of bringing in and looking out for working groups that might need, especially disseminating out to their output to other to relevant groups, where it might be this group might have a lot of contacts out that might be good. So I think that is something that can be very useful for many, not just for the HTC, but for many life science related groups, where they might be smaller in numbers.
Yes, that's, I mean, now thinking about using the group as a sounding board or getting feedback on the survey. I mean, we do have the mailing list or the group channel, so to speak. And I'm not sure how effective that is to actually reach or get people to engage with the content that's being distributed there. I don't think there is very high in volume of content or these kinds of invitations going to that mailing list. So I would maybe encourage you to just try it out and send a message to that group or through the group discussion board and see if you get some input on it. I mean, if you think that it would make a difference, then maybe one of the chairs could, I mean, send it on your behalf. But I would hope that that's not necessarily needed. And maybe we could have a joint session at some point in the future. Or, I mean, if you invite us, then, I mean, we could have it as a joint session, and then some of the members of the interest group would see that, I mean, maybe this discussion would be relevant to them.
So can I just say something here, Walmar? I'm based on your presentation that you did for GA4GH and what Anthony just said about data meshes, which has been presented, I believe, to GA4GH as well, right? So I can see an obvious kind of convergence of the two groups and potentially operability discussions that may be of interest to members of both groups. I would definitely be interested in hearing about it. The infrastructure that I oversee is actually in the process of piloting data mesh infrastructure. Anthony knows about this. So, there seems to be a lot of overlap, and it would be great to see some combined sessions come out of this discussion. Or even just conversations happening between these various groups, right?
I can also add, I mean, Robert Grossman, I think he is one of the co-chairs of the GORC health profile working group. And I mean, he is an active GA4GH contributor, more active than I am. So I am more of a guest. So I try to facilitate the connections with the RDA. I did contribute to creating a Slack channel in the GA4GH Slack space for RDA-related announcements. So if there is something that you're kind of starting to explore and would like to advertise to the GA4GH, feel free to reach out to me and I can put it in that Slack channel. But I mean, you also have a more direct channel, and I think a very good person to actually put this on the agenda for a collaboration between RDA groups and the GA4GH in Robert Grossman.
Yeah, we've been talking to Bob already, so yeah, obviously. And Anthony is from Bob's group, by the way, in case you were unaware.
I was unaware, so good to see.
And thank you, Anu, for all the great ideas and great collaboration. Very much aligned here.
All right, so I think we need to move on to the next perspective. And now I think you get to listen to another voice. So please, Jeff, go ahead. And I created this slide, so you don't need to take responsibility for it, but please.
Thanks, Palmer. And I guess I'll be brief, but I just thought it's probably good to just reflect on what we've discussed so far in the group. So if you can go to the next slide. So as I said, we started in 2022, and really, I guess our first session was really just to introduce the group and have a broad discussion. So the map there again shows where the chairs are from. And I guess at that first discussion, all of the chairs, we are all building data infrastructures, and that discussion really acknowledged that researchers using these infrastructures are using multiple data infrastructures in a project. It's very rare for one to cover everything. They do exist, and we saw like Elwazi is a great example of that. But we thought that, an initial common topic of interest would be how can life science data infrastructures and the digital assets associated with those infrastructures be made more fair, so findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And we centered the conversation around digital assets, not meaning data, but also workflows and tools, because we see them as very important parts of the ecosystem. So next slide. So we did some homework before the next plenary, which was the one in Gothenburg. And so we actually went and surveyed the operators of 13 different infrastructures from around the world. And what this matrix here is showing, the rows are showing the part of the life cycle, data life cycle, so plan, collect, process, analyze, preserve, share, and reuse. And then the columns are the different resources. They're not identified here, but they're listed there, but the columns here don't represent. So we had a bit of a rubric that we were utilizing, and we conducted some interviews with these operators of these infrastructures. And the colors here represent, if it's green, it was a high level of maturity with regard to fairness in that area. Yellow was medium, and red was low. So some of these resources were mature, some of them were just starting off. And so I guess the take-home message here is that, it's actually quite rare for a resource to be catering for all aspects of a life cycle, and it's rarer still for all aspects of that life cycle to be really producing outputs that are fair. So next slide. Yeah, that's shown here. So most of these infrastructure support processes that are only associated with a few stages of that life cycle. And there's kind of this concept of a digital handover between often one infrastructure to another infrastructure. That handover is usually done manually. It's usually up to the researcher to do that themselves. Sometimes it can happen by an API. We also, I guess, learned or reflected that the metadata really usually does not accompany the digital asset to the next stage of the handover. So really, if metadata related to how that digital asset, how it was treated, doesn't accompany that asset at the handover, fully understanding the provenance of the data or the data journey around the life cycle is pretty much impossible. And that has implications for the reproducibility of an experiment. After that session, next slide, please. We continued the discussion. I guess we sort of learned, or we talked more about what we learned at that Gothenburg session, and there's certainly a wide range of scale and maturity across different data life science infrastructures. And we were reflecting on, well, maybe it's actually a good idea for the group to think about, maybe there was a work group that could have stemmed from this, talking about we could identify guidelines for the operators of any life science data infrastructure to make the digital assets housed in them more fair. And that would enable that better handover of digital assets. So what might those guidelines contain? If you can point to the next slide, Walmar. There is a lot. So I'm not going to go through this in any great detail, but everything from how to make the infrastructure findable in the first place, use of persistent IDs, standard APIs, harmonizing policy between infrastructures, harmonizing metadata that's adherent to community standards, use of standard file formats, the list goes on and on and on. So there are many, many things that a guide could contain. So next slide, please. So I guess we were reflecting on that, and there are actually examples of infrastructures that are already doing a pretty good job at federating infrastructures. And we focused on, I think at this plenary, we actually held 2 sessions at different times of the day. So the first was to reflect on a standards-based approach, and we were looking at initiatives that were utilizing the standards frameworks and tools coming out of the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health. So there's a whole raft of standards and frameworks out of that. We heard from our friends in South Africa, implementing GA4GH standards there, and we also heard from groups in Australia that were utilizing the same approach. So building an interconnected ecosystem of infrastructure aligned with GA4GH. And we also heard around the European 1 million plus genomes initiative and the genomic data infrastructure also aligned to GA4GH standards. But then we heard about a different approach, and this is one where we can, one using a common framework, but in different deployments around the world. And this was using the Galaxy platform, which is an online platform for data analysis. But there's an effort, it's called the Use Galaxy effort, to have quite harmonized and similar large Galaxy instantiations around the world. So in the US, Europe, Australia, so on, are the ones currently in place. So we heard from groups in Germany and Australia talking about that effort. Next, and I guess the 2 approaches, provide different mechanisms. They can be linked together. So yeah, we reflected on that. Next slide, please. We also did talk after that. So we ran out of time in the plenaries, but we had a follow-up session, and I guess we started to talk about, can we map life science perspectives onto generalist frameworks such as the GORC? We certainly talked about the fact that work was being undertaken to produce a health GORC, and that was on the go. So it'll be interesting to touch base this afternoon, my afternoon, to hear about the outputs of the GORC Health Group. We talked about tool interoperability. That's a very significant area of interest. We could potentially hook into work done by other RDA groups, such as the Mapping the Landscape of Digital Research Tools Working Group. And then we also talked about ensuring individuals in the group were aware of standardization and infrastructure initiatives outside of RDA. So this includes groups that are shown here on this slide. Next slide, please. So we then, I guess, moved and pivoted a bit to having some other examples of, what are some examples of projects or methods that enable infrastructures to benchmark how fair their aspects are and how they can improve them. So again, we heard from Nikki in South Africa, and really how they're implementing FAIR in H3 Bionet and DSI Africa. So utilizing increasing findability by describing everything in various catalogs, thinking about accessibility by harnessing and utilizing data access committees and depositing in global repositories such as EGA, the increased use of ontologies to make the data objects interoperable, and then focusing on data use ontologies such as GA4GH's Duo, which is a data use ontology to think about reusability of that data. We also heard from Vasilios in Switzerland around a tool or a framework to enable verification or increased verification of resources. And we also heard about some FAIR enabling products. So one was called GoPlan and one is called the FAIR Implementation Profile. So these are tools that can be used by infrastructure operators to help them determine their fairness and increase that. Next slide, please. And then I guess we, again, did a bit of a pivot and we were starting to think about, most of the discussions we have had already are very much omic focused. but we wanted to think about thinking beyond that sort of molecular life science and thinking about integrating that with different types of biological data. So we heard from Tony Burdett in the UK, and this is he's from an entity or a project called Biofair, which is building a new federated UK digital research infrastructure, really that's aimed to support end-to-end fair research data management and analysis. And he was talking about some multimodal use cases where one was around spatial omics, which is obviously omics data plus image data, but also thinking more broadly. And one of the projects I'll be working with and sort of represents the complexity of bringing together data from multiple types is a project called Hollow Food in the UK. So it's really about bringing together a whole range of different data. So everything from host genome, proteome, metabolome, but also gut microbiome, soil microbiome, crop yield, and environmental data. So that's really is bringing together a lot of different biological data at multiple levels. We heard from Bernie in Australia talking about a group that is actually utilizing the Gen3 platform that Anthony's group is responsible for, and they're bringing together not just omic data from healthy volunteers, but also clinical tests and questionnaires, data from wearables, and so on and so forth. But then we heard about some founding or some initial work that our friends in the biological imaging space are doing. So about founding a global imaging data ecosystem. So Maria from Eurobioimaging was talking about some work that they're doing to bringing together imaging resource databases, large ones, interoperability across Europe, Japan, and Australia, and also enabling interoperability between, I guess, the three large founding global image repositories around the world. And then we also heard about efforts in Europe around how to build a life science node within the European Open Science Cloud. So this is ongoing work, but really it's this group is interested in enabling tools and workflows to support imaging, structural biology, biomolecular, and multi-omic data analysis in a conceptual framework, which is called the European Open Science Cloud. Next slide, please. And I think maybe Volmar wanted to talk to these, but one of the things that has come out of the working group is that there has been a couple of birds of a feather sessions that have come out. So one was in Brisbane, and this was really focused on how can collections of fair enabling resources support the development of community-specific guidelines. And we were hearing at that session, because it was the RDA, it was co-located with CoData and it was at International Data Week. We also heard from the GoFair Foundation, CoData and World Data System as well. And then I think next slide, please. There was also a birds of a feather earlier today or last night, which I missed because it was at 2:00 in the morning my time. And this was about bridging fair enabling resources. So I think maybe is that it, or is there one more slide? No, that's it. So I guess that's a very broad, a quick two.
Yes.
I don't know, Volmar, if you just wanted to briefly touch on what happened earlier today, or
Yes, and I mean I'm a little bit discombobulated, if that's a real word. So I think that bridge was really useful to me personally. I do engage a lot in fair implementation activities, and there's a spectrum of different ways of doing it. And this session coming from some of the work that we've been doing, looking at the FAIR principles from many different perspectives, and process being the latest one, and these birds of a feather sessions aimed to more or less support that process by coming up with some recommendations on how to describe your implementation profile I mean, the FAIR principles, you can implement them in many, many different ways. And it would be useful if you could see how others have implemented FAIR and compare it with how someone else has implemented FAIR, or how you yourself have done it. And the Go FAIR Foundation, they have done quite some work on defining something they call FAIR implementation profiles, and a taxonomy of different types of tools related to that. And then there are other initiatives in CODATA, the International Science Council's Committee of Data, that have been trying to find the combination of standards that could serve as a cross-domain interoperability framework. And there are other activities focusing on supporting FAIR implementation practices, like the FAIR sharing registry that we have here in the RDA. So trying to kind of bring these perspectives together and start discussing, I mean, how could we support the exchange of these FAIR implementation profiles between communities, and really foster learnings. So it could be promoting adoption of the Go FAIR ecosystem, or try to adapt it a little bit so it is easier for people in the future to make use of it. And also bringing in the perspectives from I mean, other similar activities that we might not know about. So I think, for me personally, that's a really good discussion that came out of the Life Science Data Infrastructure Synthesis Group. And those sessions have been quite popular. And I think they're also a good example of not only the RDA, but also these other global organizations coming together and having discussions with, I mean, a potential working group then being the arena for those discussions. So I would like to see maybe, or I think that it could be useful to actually be more active in trying to take some of the topics that we're discussing and see. So would this make a good topic for a working group or an interest group? And is there a critical mass of people that would realistically have time to steward that process? I'm matching, I mean, does the topic fit into the RDA, or does it fit better somewhere else? So that's, I think, could be a role of the interest group there. With that said, I did put a question behind your talk here. And that was, how do we ensure high engagement and impact of the topics we present at the RDA plenary meetings? And I mean, we have had ebbs and flows, so to speak. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's fewer people attending. And it would probably be good to reflect a little bit on which topics tend to work well and which might not work as well. So we kind of optimize the kinds of discussions we actually bring into the RDA, and how to prepare or rig the sessions to be as engaging as possible. So maybe we don't need to put too much time on this question, given that we only have 20 minutes left. So
I think maybe I just would reflect, Velma, on engaging the group to, either surveying them to identify popular topics. We have 171 members in the group, and but I think the most people we ever had at a plenary was the first one, or the one in Gothenburg, and we had a really good representation, maybe 50 or 60, but I think it is an interest group, and people's interest ebbs and flows, and may be focused on some aspects. So I think inviting commentary from the group about what topics I think would be useful.
yes, and maybe that's also a way of getting commitment. I think one of the reasons why the plenary in Stockholm was very successful was partly it's the 10th anniversary of the RDA, but then also us having quite a large number of invited speakers. presenting very interesting perspectives. So if we could maybe do a better job at managing the number of speakers and making sure that they stick on time, so we have time for the discussions as well, maybe that is actually a good recipe for having a critical mass of participants at the plenaries. So food for thought. Good. I'm gonna segue into the next presentation, and these are also slides that I have borrowed from Elisha. And they are showcasing or putting in context where K-Base is trying to situate itself as a solution for AI integrated or as a AI integrated and self-improving platform. So K-Base is one of the partners of the RDA Life Sciences Data Infrastructures Group. They weren't able to attend, but I can say that they're funded by the US Department of Energy under the Office of Science and Biology and Environmental Research Programs. And the purpose of K-Base is to serve as a community-driven research platform for systems biology. They support the Department of Energy and their data management activities and also implementation of the FAIR data principles. And they offer data tracking with provenance, making sure that workflows are reproducible and support integration in analysis and also the downstream publication of data. But there are some challenges with implementing the FAIR principles. So the domain application or use requires domain-specific standards, and FAIR can be implemented on a spectrum, so to speak. So FAIR is a prerequisite, but it might not be sufficient for all the kinds of downstream analysis that you might want to do. So you could find yourself being able to discover and access a file, but when you download it and start to unpack the actual data enclosed in it, then you still might end up with some questions on, is it really comparable to the other data set that I downloaded? And how are these two data sets related or not related? It might not be completely clear based on the content that you and the context that you have been able to unpack. So, for example, chemical measurements, there you have the context that's very important. So it could be total carbon as weight or as volume. So the unit of measure and the context for the measure is really important. And then you also have species abundance that depends on how the sample was collected. And it also depends on the resolution on the taxonomy that you use to label it or annotate it. So is it on the genus or the species or the strain? And that might be really important depending on what kind of research question you're asking. So implementation of FAIR relies on, your interpretation of what is fair enough and specialized enough. So K-Base and other biological science infrastructure, including those in the Life Science Data Infrastructure Synthesis Group, are exploring how to cope with the complex biological data by enabling comparison. So that's the C of data, including quality and the values themselves. The organization of data, that's the O, to create contextually relevant links, samples to measurements, and then control and treated samples and things like that. And then the idea here is to enable predictions. So that's the P, and produce models for these complex systems that can more rapidly be improved and propagated across infrastructures and make generalizable across different domains. And this requires an engaged community of researchers, and that's the E, to be able to evaluate and validate that what's coming out of this is sound and that the implementation is detailed enough to do what it is meant to do. And maybe also looking into the future, it might be more relevant than ever that the communities are engaged in validating the predictions and also the results of AI agents or these agents acting as co-scientists in the future. So to address all of these challenges, KBase and their team is working on reducing the time required to find comparable data across diverse data sources and harmonize and organize the data for analysis. So they have updated their data model and architecture to support the implementation of these coping mechanisms, or COPE. In particular, at this stage, the harmonization and integration. So they're currently working on a prototype system for the DOE researchers in the US for testing. And this allows you to casually explore causally related data, creates predictions of those data that can be used to train and upskill agents. And this is a segue into a description of an architecture that relies on modern technology stacks that will then emerge to support an interface and also these kind of implementations where AI agents and co-scientists could be one of the components. And this leads into the idea for a topic for the upcoming plenary in London. So the KBase ecosystem poses the question, how can we build scalable, AI integrated and self-improving data platforms? And we think that that is something that could generalize across other life science data infrastructures as well. So we asked Alicia if she would be interested in inviting people to start drafting a session proposal and preparing a session based on that. And I think we're in a good position to start those discussions after this plenary. So you will find Alicia's contact details in the slide here, but also feel free to just state that you're interested in the meeting minutes, and we will kind of follow up with all of you and invite you to give feedback. And with that, the segue here is basically, so which groups should we invite to plan our session for the 27th plenary? And that could include your groups of colleagues, but also RDA groups that you think would be good candidates to work with us on developing this topic and this discussion. And I see that there are some comments in the chat. So maybe would you be willing to speak to this, Patty?
Yes, I think you caught me. It's a little bit late here in the US. Someone else is also from the US, right? Jeff? No, nobody else. Anu is from the US. Okay, so yeah, I really liked your analysis on what you're going to do next after FAIR data. So you can obviously have very FAIR repositories, and you can find the data sets that you're looking for, but you can then download it. It has happened to me as a researcher, and then you realize you cannot use it. It doesn't have the information you need. It's in a different format, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that we are working on with the AIDV working group is ways to go to the data before it's even uploaded or even sent to a repository, so that we know if it's valuable to any researcher to actually include it. And we, especially Lifetime Omics, we have developed a technology for that, Fairless, and we're obviously now, like everybody else, looking at how to use agents, AI agents, and that brings a whole conundrum of things, especially in the healthcare or biomedical or genomics field, because of obviously personal identifiable information, etc. So we are looking at all that, and we have a BOF on Wednesday, but I think there are synergies between any repository that has already implemented, fair data sharing, and also what we're doing in AIDV. And I would say also there's another group, and I haven't spoken to them, or I once spoke to them, called the Immune Digital Twin group, where they're trying to, I would say, they are abstracting the information into a digital twin, and it's one way also to approach getting information from a data set by looking at the digital twin that has abstracted all the personal information.
That's a very good point. So I think we should remember to reach out to that group, and also maybe start discussing a little bit. So what would be the relevant scope for the session? I mean, focus infrastructure, focus on a specific challenge with certain types of data, or do we want to keep it very broad and materialize or focus in on something past the session, so to speak? So, or maybe it could be parallel sessions that we do something together with a group, focusing on one aspect of this discussion, and then in another session we could have another perspective, so to speak. I think there are so many opportunities for approaching something like this. It would have been great to have Alicia here. Unfortunately, she couldn't attend, but I think maybe that could be something we do with some sort of proximity to this plenary, to actually set up a meeting specifically to discuss that session proposal. I think the few times that we have scheduled a follow-up meeting after the plenaries, it's been somewhat successful. So we can use the Hoover platform to actually announce a date we just need, or a time. So I think that kind of gives it a little bit more visibility than what we otherwise would get. And since we now have this discussion during the first day, maybe we can also plant the seed in other groups for those of you who are attending other interest group and working group sessions throughout the week. Yes, any other reflections on groups that we should try to reach out to regarding this, or just reflections on what we've been talking about today in general? There was also this question that I prepared. So what questions did I forget to ask? What should we be asking ourselves going forward? And we might not figure out the answer now, but at least we can kind of start bringing that with us for some continued discussions. And this is the last question, so I'm going to leave this open, and then the scheduled time, I mean, if we would have stuck to the time plan, would have been to have a synthesis here. So actually kind of following up a little bit on what did we actually put down under each of the questions, and how can we kind of go forward with this for informing our future activities. But given that we only have 5 minutes left, so maybe it's a good time to wrap up, and then maybe Jeff and I can do an attempt to summarize what we've heard today into the collaborative meeting notes document. There's a section at the top that's going to be a kind of quick summary of what was discussed and presented, and then also some groups that would be relevant for a follow-up. So maybe we can fill that in, and if you look back into that document sometime at the end of the week, then you can pitch in, so to speak, and add some comments there. Jeff, any thoughts? Would that work for you? Try to get this.
That sounds good to me.
All right. So then maybe it's time to wrap up. And we've already discussed the next steps, I guess. Is there anything else that we had thought of mentioning here?
I guess just one thing to note on the next plenary that's in London, I have heard that it may only be in person. So that may just be something to consider. So, I mean, that's fine, but I think as far as inviting, a participation from a global audience, that may be a challenge. So that's probably just worth noting.
Yes, that's good to think about. I mean, we need to be early with inviting people and really securing that they do get sign off to attend, and then also can schedule a reasonable flight route to the location. I've understood that the situation currently with the airports being out of commission makes it difficult, for example, to travel from Australia. Lars.
I was just gonna say that that was a good number, but also bring back what Anu said in the beginning about the fact that like an in-person plenary may have very steep attendance problems from countries, especially that are of high interest, but that have more difficulties in securing funding for travel or visas and things like this. So I think, especially considering that the next one is a physical one, it might be good to sort of think about wanting to maybe have a follow-up meeting on that specific one afterwards, like a special sort of, hey, this is what we talked about during the sessions or joint sessions or whatever we have going on the P27, and then sort of in close proximity having a virtual meetup of the group afterwards. I think that could probably be very appreciated by a lot of members that can't attend physically.
Yeah, so I think that's something we definitely need to follow up on. Survey the interest of, I mean, what kind of formats it would be useful to engage from the interest group members. Something that we have discussed very briefly between some of the co-chairs is maybe we could have a planning meeting leading up to the event. Where, I mean, we could have some dry run presentations or some discussions that might then be repeated or done in more depth at the plenary. So it could be the other way around. It doesn't necessarily need to be that we do the plenary on site first and then the virtual discussion after. So either could work. I've also floated the idea of perhaps organizing a co-located event. And if we do that, then maybe we would be in more control and could choose a venue that offers hybridization. So then, I mean, we could have a more exclusive and in-depth event for the life sciences, and then we could have more of a bridging discussions where we try to bring in the other RDA interest groups and working groups and whatnot to the discussion, so to speak. So I think there's a lot of venues to continue to explore. But now we're at the hour, so that means it's time to close the session and also for me to start thinking about getting some shut-eye. So thank you so much for joining, everyone. And I hope to see you, those of you who are new, at the future plenaries, but maybe also with some inquiries on the I'm not sure if we call it a mailing list anymore since it's the kind of virtual platform, the discussion area of the group on the website. All right.
Thanks,
So I'm
everyone.
going to stop the recording.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
everyone.
Thank you all.